My name is Vincent. I'm with military election forecasting, and today I'm gonna be talking about Joe Biden's problems and some of his issues with his 2024 reelection bid. And many Democrats and many people in general talk about Joe Biden as a heavy favorite and why he's almost a shoo-in for reelection. And yes, Joe Biden might be the favorite. Yes, he is more than likely going to be reelected. But regardless, he has many issues that are oftentimes overlooked. And today I'm going to be talking about them. So for Joe Biden, he has 226 electoral votes, which I'm sure that he has locked down. I don't realistically see him losing Colorado, New Mexico, Nebraska, second district, Virginia, New Hampshire, Maine, Minnesota. These are places he really doesn't have a chance of losing. And for Republicans, they're not realistically going to lose Nebraska second. I mean Maine second, Iowa or Ohio, so or Alaska, even if they might be somewhat competitive. And realistically, for Joe Biden, it would be stupid for him to target Florida or Texas. I don't realistically see him having a realistic chance at flipping both. I think that he can make them more competitive. Like he can hold his ground here. He's going to probably outperform in Texas. Florida is more so up in the air. But regardless of him doing better in both, I don't think he'll do better in both to realistically have a chance of winning. So for Joe Biden, before I talk about his problems, I do think that he does have a baseline of support. I think he will get, and for those, I think that Nevada is one of the states where I think that Joe Biden realistically will hold on to. You go to 2022. Democrats were able to hold on here, even with not good Latino turnout, with turnout being down in Las Vegas. Democrats still were able to narrowly hold on in the state. And Joe Biden did not get good turnout as well in Las Vegas and still won in 2020. So realistically, Joe Biden is not Catherine Cortez Masto. He's not going to do as well with Hispanic Latino voters as the first Latina woman elected to Senate. But regardless, more turnout amongst them and, just more turnout in Las Vegas is still going to help Democrats in 2024. In Arizona, Katie Hobbs, who was an extremely weak candidate. She didn't have really any appeal to Hispanic Latino voters. She wasn't the strongest candidate for suburban voters. She was still able to narrowly win this race. She actually won by a larger margin than Joe Biden in 2020. So, with looking at that, and with Democrats crushing Republicans here in 2022, and yes, Joe Biden is not Mark Kelly. He's not going to win by Mark Kelly's margin. I'm still confident that Joe Biden probably has this state he can really rely on against Republicans, and in Michigan as well. Um, there Democrats had an extremely good performance in Michigan in 2022, and yes, it was a local race, not a federal race. And Joe Biden is not Gretchen Whitmer. He's not going to win Macomb County probably, but still. He's not going to do as well with the white working class and white rural voters, but it will be a lot more black turnout in the Detroit area, at least relative to 2022. You look here, in Wayne County, only 457,000 votes, and Joe Biden got about 600,000. So, there's a lot more room for, a lot of Biden voters he can rely on. He's going to do much better in these suburban counties that he did last time. So, I think that he can rely on Michigan in 2024. But, these next 12 electoral votes who need to be reelected are going to be a hurdle for him. So his first struggle, I would say, is with Hispanic Latino voters. Even though history tells us that Democrats outperform Hispanic Latino voters and Republicans, whoever the incumbent president is, Bill Clinton was able to outperform Hispanic Latino voters in 1996 relative to 1992. George W. Bush was able to outperform Hispanic Latino voters in 2004 relative to 2000. And Barack Obama was able to outperform in 2012 relative to 2008 with Hispanic Latino voters, and so was Donald Trump in 2020 relative to 2016. But history does not always continue being it. There's a reason why the past is not the future. So even though history tells us Hispanic Latino voters shift to incumbents, history also told us that Ohio chose the winner of the presidency and it didn't. That streak was broken when Donald Trump won Ohio, but still lost the presidency. History told us that Vigo County in Indiana decided every presidential winner, and Donald Trump won this county by a convincing margin, even though he lost his reelection bid. So just because something is history does not mean it can't stop being it. So Joe Biden relying on trends of Hispanic Latino voters is not going to put him in the White House. He's going to actually have to put in the work to improve amongst those demographics. And very similar thing with black voters. He only has like a 70% approval amongst black voters, 65, 70% approval. And considering he won over 90% of those voters, that's really embarrassing. So it's very likely that most of them are going to vote for him regardless. But you have seen black turnout collapse and cost many Democrats elections. And that cost Democrats election 2014 with Hispanic Latino voters in the Southwest. But this is something that cost Terry McAuliffe re-election. I mean, Terry McAuliffe, his election in 2021 in Virginia, where even though he outperformed with white voters relative to um, in 2013 versus 2021 performance, black turnout collapsed dramatically, and it cost him to lose Virginia. And Hillary Clinton, even though she did better in the suburbs in the Rust Belt, yes, she lost considerable ground with the white working class and white rural voters, but the black voters in Detroit, in Milwaukee that did not show up for her, in Philadelphia as well, in the Philadelphia area, cost her the 2016 election. So for Joe Biden, that's a realistic worry sign for him. And he spent a lot of time, making sure that black voters are represented in his administration with Kamala Harris, with him confirming the first black woman Supreme Court justice. We're trying to make South Carolina the first Democratic primary. He's realistically went out of his way to help with black representation, but representation isn't always the most important thing when there's actual issues that people don't see change being made on. So for Joe Biden, his coalition was based off of record-breaking black turnout, doing extremely well with white college-educated voters and white suburban voters, and not falling dramatically from Hillary Clinton's margin of the white working class, as well as doing well for Hispanic and Latino voters and the increasing Asian American electorate. So for Joe Biden, Joe Biden's coalition is hanging on with people that really hate Donald Trump and people that don't like Joe Biden, but just see him as the better alternative. And that's not always a good strategy because even though Donald Trump lost, Donald Trump has a lot of supporters that really actually like Donald Trump, that really support Donald Trump, and Joe Biden doesn't have that. Um, Same thing for Barack Obama. Donald Trump can rely on white rural voters, on white working class voters, and Barack Obama could rely on black voters, while Joe Biden can't really rely on anybody. All he can say is that suburban voters and college educated voters are more than likely going to vote for him. And even though he might be the favorite, he has very considerable issues. And um, I just want to point out that Joe Biden is not John Fetterman. He's not Tony Evers. He's not Gretchen Whitmer. He's not Raphael Warnock. He's not Catherine Cortez Masto. He's not Maggie Hassan. And he's not Mark Kelly. He's not Josh Shapiro. He's not any of these Democrats that, won in 2022. Joe Biden and the Democrats are not seen as the same thing. And Democrats are not the most, Democrats are not really approving of Joe Biden. And the good thing is that Joe Biden's approval is still in the, low to high 40s, even with not good approval amongst his base. So that is very encouraging that his numbers with independents is good enough to hold his approval rating in the 40s. And similar thing with for Kamala Harris, that the fact that both of them are not that terribly unpopular, even with not being popular amongst their base, is not really a bad sign. But still, it's still a very worrisome sign, and people need to talk about it more because regardless of what happens, Joe Biden is not going to do as well as Raphael Warnock in these very black Atlanta suburban counties. Like I still think he's going to improve in a lot of them. He's going to hold his ground in some of these richer, whiter Atlanta suburbs, so not as well in Fulton County, DeKalb County, Clayton County. He might fit Fayette County, but regardless, he's not going to do as well in these counties, and he didn't in 2020. And yes, Donald Trump is stronger than all Republican candidates in Georgia for the most part, but still, he's not going to do as well here. He's not going to do as well as John Fetterman did with these white working class counties in Pennsylvania. You just look at one of these counties, for example, like Homing County. Um, Joe Biden got 20% of the vote. Well, he actually did as well here, but let's look at Elk County, for example. He only got 26% of the vote here, John Fetterman got 30% of the vote. He's not going to perform as well in these working class counties and these white rural counties as John Fetterman. And yes, he will get a lot more black turnout in Philadelphia relative to him, but he will hold his ground in suburban counties and probably hold his ground in Pittsburgh. But he's not going to do as well in a lot of these areas. So it's not necessarily fair to compare 2022 candidates to Joe Biden because they're not the same. And Joe Biden's coalition is based off of holding on to Obama and Hillary Clinton's gains. And history tells us that that oftentimes fails. Al Gore and John Kerry failed to recreate Bill Clinton's coalition, and Mitt Romney and John McCain failed to recreate George W. Bush's coalition, and Hillary Clinton failed to recreate Obama's coalition. So the next candidate does not always recreate the first winning strategy because coalitions change, the country changes, politics changes, state changes. There's a reason why Virginia and Ohio used to be the most competitive swing states, and now they're solid in both parties' favor, in the opposite parties' favors. So Georgia was a solid red state and now it's not. Pennsylvania was a solid blue state and now it's not. So our country changes, and you can't rely on things that worked previously to work for you now. Because just assuming that you're going to get this high turnout from black voters and young voters and improve amongst Hispanic and Latino voters is not necessarily the most winnable strategy. You have to put in the work. You have to prove you're going to hold on to it. Because looking at demographics, Democrats should have flipped North Carolina a long time ago, but they haven't because they struggled to get the turnout from black voters they need to win. And that is something that cost Democrats to lose a D+10 state in Virginia. It cost Hillary Clinton to lose states that she won convincingly, and that Obama won convincingly in 2012. So just because that's existed in the past does not mean it exists in the future. So for Joe Biden, yes, he has the advantage. Yes, he has places he's going to outperform. But the past does not always lead to a bright future. The present does not always indicate positives for tomorrow. So even though Democrats have shown brightness now, Democrats and Joe Biden are not mutual exclusive terms. There's a difference between a party and a candidate. And that's all I have to say for today. So feel free to criticize my video and to please like and comment down below. Again, I am Langston with Military Election Forecasting, and my next video will be about Republicans and their 2024 problems. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning into this video.